Hi, my name is Gibson, and I am the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you about how the anxious attachment style shows up in each of the 6 stages of relationship. So I want to let you guys know, I can give you a lot of information in this 10-minute video, 15-minute video, but I highly recommend, if this is something that resonates with you, that you just go take the course inside the Personal Development School, because it will change your perception about dating. We have wonderful comments about it inside the members lounge and inside the Facebook group about how it's blowing people's mind and they wish they knew this 20 years ago and all these different wonderful things. And I honestly just want people to know this and understand this, because we are so impacted, obviously, by our attachment style, number one, but number two, by each of the 6 stages of relationship and how we interact with our attachment style in those 6 stages of dating. And even once you've reprogrammed your attachment style, and even once you've done a lot of that deep subconscious work, after that point, you'll still have these unconscious perceptions that you carry about how quickly things should move in each of the 6 stages and about what to do in each of the 6 stages. And our needs and expectations of our attachment style, even once we've done the work to change the unhealthy patterns of it, we'll still keep some of our personality traits of it. And this will create different expectations between ourselves and people of other attachment styles. And if we don't know this, it can create a lot of challenge in terms of how we relate and how we interact in each of these 6 stages. So what I'm going to do with you in this video is I'm going to give you some high level, really important points that you want to know. And if you're not familiar already, these are the 6 stages. So I'm going to go through each of the 6 stages with you, and then I'm going to talk to you about how the anxious preoccupied sort of tends to show up in different protest behaviors, different patterns that show up in terms of their subconscious belief patterns, thought patterns, and emotions. And I'll also talk to you a little bit about how different stages tend to react and respond in each of these 6 stages as well. So number one, we have the dating phase. Now, if you look at the anxious attachment style individual, they show up so differently in this stage of relationship than the dismissive avoidant, for example. Usually they want the dating phase to last somewhere from 2 weeks to 2 to 3 months. And usually at the 2 to 3 month mark, they're very eager for commitment. And the only things that are holding them back from communicating about exclusivity or commitment are basically if they just have really strong beliefs or fears that the partner will reject them. But sometimes you'll even see an anxious person who's willing to jump into a relationship after the first or second date. And so when we have that, it doesn't make that good or bad or right or wrong. It makes that a perception and a preference. And I think it is important to a certain degree to really suss out and get to know and understand the person that you're dating before giving them so much of your time and so much of your energy, because really truly the people we spend the most time with in our lives have such a strong impact on our personality over time, that you want to make sure, okay, when I'm dating somebody and I see them, I want to look at them and be like, okay, I want to recognize that in 5 years' time, I'm probably going to take on a lot of these traits and qualities of this person to a certain degree, or at least some of their traits are going to rub off on me. And do I want some of the characteristics and qualities that this person has? Now, look at that time period, okay? So you've got the 2 dates up to 2 to 3 months, and look at the dismissive avoidant, for example. They usually don't even want to make a commitment until the 5, maybe 4 to 6 month mark if they're out of a new relationship and want to move on a little bit quicker, or if they are in a stage of their lives where they're really trying to do the work and show up. But most dismissive avoidants are going to see they want to make a commitment to something more serious around 6 months or later into dating. And so this can create a point of contention, because one person can be really ready at 2 months and another person, there's a 4-month gap. And so if we don't understand our attachment styles, unconscious expectations around this stage, and also the amount of validation we expect to have in this stage, some of the protest behaviors that can come up in this stage, then it's going to give us a lot of friction between ourselves and the person that we want to get closer to. So that's number one. Some of the protest behaviors and stuff, I won't go into it too much right now, but some of the protest behaviors are things like trying to make a partner jealous in the dating stage is quite common for the anxious preoccupied attachment style, because they're looking for that validation and reinforcement, but fear speaking up and asking for it, and fear seeming like they come across as pushy is quite common. And sometimes we'll also see the anxious preoccupied start to have those sort of early symptoms of neediness right around the 2-month mark for sure, when they're hoping and expecting for a commitment. So the honeymoon stage, this is where the anxious preoccupied, if they could, would stay forever. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to want to stay in the dating or in the honeymoon phase of a relationship for longer. But where it can go wrong is that it can stunt our growth in terms of the entire life cycle of a relationship. So it's really important to move through each of the 6 stages, and to really do so as effectively and efficiently in a way as possible. If we're stunted on a stage, it means we haven't really taken the lessons and the learnings from that stage of the relationship yet. So let's say, for example, if you look at the preceding stages, we've got the honeymoon stage, the power struggle stage, the stability stage, commitment stage, and bliss stage. Now, what we're supposed to do is ultimately get to the bliss stage, which is like the honeymoon phase, but where we've fully integrated our sense of self into the relationship. So sometimes the honeymoon phase is characterized by us sort of relinquishing our sense of self. We can really prioritize another person. We're sort of on this neurochemical high. We've got oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin and phenylethylamine, which is sort of the neurochemical of infatuation. We've got all of these neurochemicals flowing, and sometimes we still have this mask on, and not like a terrible mask, but just the mask of you're always on your best behavior. And you're always trying to show up as your best self and kind of impress the person and be really present and focused. And a lot more of that shows up in that stage. Now, for the anxious, they want to hold on to that stage, but sometimes in doing that, you stunt the progression into the next stages, which ultimately prevent you from entering into the bliss stage, which again is like the honeymoon phase, but with your vulnerabilities and being fully seen and heard and understood, and with the understanding of needs and communication and taking each other's needs into consideration, and all these sort of beautiful things that create more harmony at a deeper level in a relationship. So sometimes if we hang on here too long, that can create resistance. And another thing is the anxious preoccupied wants to stay in here for like a full 2 years or more. And the dismissive avoidant generally wants to get out of the honeymoon phase as quickly as possible. They usually don't stay in the honeymoon phase that long either, because it's not very comfortable for a dismissive avoidant who's had to rely on their sense of self so distinctly to create security and to create self-soothing. It doesn't feel that great for them or that safe to be that vulnerable, and they get really subconsciously motivated to integrate their sense of identity back into the relationship as quickly as possible. So they'll start to naturally evolve into the power struggle phase at a faster rate, because they want to take the mask off and really be themselves and have their space and time and stay protected and stay safe a lot more quickly. And so again, this can be a huge point of contention, because we project from our perception. So if let's pretend I'm the anxious attachment, the anxious preoccupied, if I'm in that space and I'm dating somebody and suddenly like they are ready to get out of this like infatuation space, I can only see usually through my perceptual filter of reality, unless of course I'm doing this work or learning about different tools. And so I'll naturally be like, oh my gosh, if they're changing their behavior in the relationship and they're acting less infatuated and less excited, it must mean that they're losing feelings or losing attraction. And so we'll naturally fill in the gaps of our understanding with worst case scenarios based on how we would operate, like what it would mean for us to want to spend less time together 6 months into the honeymoon phase. That would mean that we're not even that interested in the person any longer. But for a dismissive avoidant, their motives are different. And so it's different not just for the dismissive avoidant, but for the fearful avoidant and for the securely attached individual. And so if we don't recognize the markers of each of these stages and what's going on in each of these stages, then we're going to get a lot of things convoluted. We're going to have a lot of misunderstandings arise. So know that when a partner, especially who's more avoidant, is moving out of the honeymoon phase faster, it's not necessarily a warning sign. It actually could be, in a way, an indirect sign of progression from an avoidant attachment style, that they're moving into the next stage. Now, the power struggle stage is the 3rd stage, and this is the one that gets the bad rap. But like I've said, the power struggle stage is a time where you're getting the opportunity to have the rite of passage, essentially, to fully integrate your sense of self, to have to learn all the hard lessons in the relationship and how you relate to one another. So really what this means is the hard lessons in how you relate to one another are things like how to communicate your needs, how to not betray yourself. This is something the anxiously attached individual does, and I go a lot into this inside the school in the course. But this sense of like giving up your own feelings and needs and repressing them and trying to, connect everything to your partner and trying to do everything for your partner, that stunts the SHIT out of your growth in this stage. Like, this literally stunts your growth so much because you're not giving yourself, this is one of the most important things, you're not giving yourself the lesson to be able to move on to the stability stage. And if you don't show yourself in this space, if you don't understand who you are and how to have yourself and have your partner too in a relationship, essentially if you're not understanding like healthy interdependence, there are going to be issues that arise. There's going to be a lot of challenges that come up because you're going to basically get stuck in the power struggle stage, and you're going to breed resentment because if you are doing everything for your partner and you're showing up and you're still being your best self and you're going way out of your way and overextending yourself to, to the point where it might have consequences on the other 6 of the 7 areas of your life. If you're doing this over and over again, and then you have a partner who's not, you're going to perceive this imbalance. And that's what conflict is. Conflict is basically a perception of imbalance between two people. And so you're going to have these breeding grounds for conflict to occur, and this is going to create a lot of long-term issues. So you really want to understand that. A couple other things, I mean, there's a lot more to it, but a couple other things about the power struggle stage that you want to understand are, you're also supposed to learn in the power struggle stage how to communicate your feelings, how to communicate your needs, what your boundaries are, all different types of boundaries, your time boundaries, your emotional boundaries, your spatial boundaries, your physical boundaries, your material or financial boundaries, and your personal boundaries as a whole, right? Like everything around you on a day-to-day basis. What are those boundaries? What are your needs in these different areas? And if you're not clear on that, and what those things are while you're in a relationship, because you find that you just sort of throw your sense of self away when you go into a relationship, a lot of challenges will naturally come out of that situation. So that's really important. And you also want to work through a lot of your core wounds in this phase. And you want to understand your partner's core wounds and be able to validate those as well. And sometimes, though the anxious try so hard and they can be so loving and lovable in the relationship, sometimes they'll forget about their partner's core wounds and naturally poke at them when they're really triggered because of this pent-up resentment because of the perceived imbalance, which actually, like, you have a part in, essentially, right? So it's really important to be able to recognize what your core wounds are, those fears of abandonment, fears of being alone, fears of not being good enough, anything that comes up in that area, and be able to take your partner's needs into consideration as well. So and some of this too, I mean, there's so many things I want to say right now, but I'm going to try to keep it not too long. One other thing too that's important is to recognize that when you have a fear of abandonment, if that results in criticism and sometimes emotionally dumping on your partner and trying to make your partner responsible for your feelings, that's something you want to tweak as well. It doesn't mean don't communicate your feelings. Absolutely communicate your feelings, but communicate them in a space where you're in control of them first. So do the emotional regulation work first with you. And there's tons of steps in how to do this in the course. So do the emotional regulation work with yourself first, and then bring that to your partner. Let them know how you were impacted and create a solution. So for example, if your partner is going out with friends and you're anxious and you're feeling, maybe I'm excluded, or maybe, why wasn't I invited? Maybe your partner just wants to spend time with their friends. But of course, sometimes from the anxious, preoccupied nervous system, that's a scary thing. If you have a pain point there, instead of, your partner coming home or you seeing your partner the next day if you don't live together, and you saying something to your partner like, oh, I felt so excluded last night, and just sort of venting, it's really hard to not personalize that if you're hearing that as a recipient. And so what you can do instead is be like, hey, I recognize within myself, I experience feelings of exclusion, and I realize that, where this comes from, maybe at some points in childhood or whatever it is for you. And I'm realizing in the future it would be really helpful for you to just shoot me a loving text at some point through the evening, so I feel like I'm at least included in your thoughts. And so that's what I need. So if you come to the table as the emotional regulated person, you've already regulated your feelings, and then you share what you were feeling, and then you express your needs going forward to make it easier on you. This is a really healthy way of communicating, as opposed to, I felt so excluded last night, it was so hard for me, and especially if you have an avoidant partner, which anxious, preoccupied individuals often attract avoidant partners into their lives and vice versa. And there's many subconscious reasons for that, by the way. I'm not saying like energetic attraction necessarily whatsoever. But if you have this space, right, where this is your experience, then the more you can communicate healthily instead of emotionally dumping on your partner like that, the more you're going to be heard and the more your needs are going to be met. Okay, so there's so many other things I want to say about the power struggle stage, but again, honestly, if you're interested in this stuff and you really want to work through a lot of it, take the course. It will help so much. The next thing, the stability stage, okay? So stability stage in the relationship, sometimes this stage can be confusing for the anxious preoccupied partner because this is the stage after like the dating, honeymoon, and power struggle. This is like peace and calm. And for individuals who are used to the high in relationships and sometimes really expecting the high in a way, this can feel like, oh no, there's a low and there's boredom and what's going on. And if you're not comfortable in harmony and stability, because maybe that's not a subconscious comfort zone, it's easy for that to be misperceived as feelings changing as opposed to the relationship maturing. And so it's really important to recognize that in the stability stage. And there's a few other rites of passage, but this is a really great time as a general rule to like stay connected, stay in communication, have healthy habits for intimacy and connection between yourself and your loved one. And then that brings us to the commitment stage, which is the stage essentially where it's time to make an actual commitment. And most people get married in the honeymoon stage or, and then get finally are married. And then all of a sudden the power struggle stage starts post honeymoon of the actual honeymoon, not the honeymoon stage. And then people misperceive that and they're like, what happened? This person was a nightmare after I married them. Everything changed. It was a lie. And that may not be the case. It may just be that you haven't seen your partner and yourself in the power struggle stage with this specific person. So the commitment stage is a great time to make a commitment. It's a great time to plan for the future, really communicate about your dreams, your vision, your priorities, what you want in a relationship, what you want in a lifestyle, children, work, duties around the house, all these like really deeper conversations essentially, but things where you're assessing what's important to you in this area of your life and in this stage of a relationship. And the commitment stage is a beautiful time to do that. And lastly, we have the bliss stage. And this is, by this time at the bliss stage, you've made a commitment, you've talked all these things through, you've learned how to be stable and harmonious in your relationship. You have learned to communicate, integrate your sense of self into the relationship, share your feelings, your needs, your fears, your vulnerabilities, validate each other's emotions and understand them deeply, work through core wounds. And two people at this stage now have this really deep connection combined with the honeymoon stage, right? It's sort of like this falling in love all over again, but having that sense of maturity in the relationship that coexists with that. And this is also sometimes referred to as the co-creation stage, where one couple, two parties will go out into the world and create things, maybe do charity work together or create a business together, or whatever it might be. There's a lot of that tends to show up in this stage as well. So I hope this is helpful so far. Let me know if you have questions in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.